As part of a growing rivalry among Hong Kong's organized crime syndicates, 6 people were killed when 3 armed men flung gasoline bombs into a crowded mahjong parlor. These kinds of headlines were very common in Hong Kong newspapers in the 1990s. These events grew so common that they became part of everyday life for the natives. Watch the video till the end as we tell you all the details about why the 1990s were a decade of famous gangsters and spectacular robberies in Hong Kong. The beginning. Nowadays, Hong Kong has one of the lowest violent crime rates in the world. Violence is almost inconceivable. Any violent news, no matter how little, is in the news for days. However, things were very different a few decades ago. Hong Kong was engulfed in a crime wave, with police confronting heavily armed gangs on the streets of the city's main neighborhoods daily. The widespread nature of the crimes resulted in Hong Kong Police Force establishing a special duties unit known as the Flying Tigers. This was an armed reaction force that was trained to deal with terrorist attacks and other major events disrupting the peace. This group was one of the few branches of the Hong Kong Police Force trained to deal with robberies at the time. The usage of AK-47s, 7.62 handguns, and hand grenades was very common. The officers on patrol were well aware that an armed robbery might occur at any time, and they dreaded getting the radio call to react to one that was already underway, as they only had a .38 revolver, which was nothing against an AK-47. In the 1980s, the country's rigorous Maoist structure was being dissolved in favor of something more commercial. Consequently, everyone wanted a piece of the action because there was money to be made. Corruption was rampant, and military-grade weaponry like AK-47s leaked into the black market, thanks to a lack of checks and balances on local governments and institutions like the People's Liberation Army. China was also a big part of this. Triads in Hong Kong were so close to Chinese gangs that they used to send illegal Chinese immigrants into the territory to commit crimes. After breaking the law, the criminals sneaked back across the territory's porous border, and as China and Hong Kong do not have any extradition treaty, this strategy was safe. The young people in Hong Kong were also being affected by an upsurge in the use of soft drugs such as marijuana and mandrax, which were easily imported from China. The Triad's influence kept on expanding, spurred by a sense of powerlessness among Hong Kong's impoverished young regarding the colony's future. The 1990s were also Hong Kong film's golden age, as the crime wave that took the country hostage also had a cinematic flavor to it. There were many colorful characters, such as big spender Chung Se-kung, a hedonist who abducted Victor Lee, Tycoon Lee Ka's eldest son, who made off with 1 billion Hong Kong dollars in ransom. Broken Tooth Wan Kwok Koi, the ruler of the Triad, ruled Macau while flaunting his criminal lifestyle with fancy automobiles, 3 high-profile marriages, and a hit film based on his own life. Yip Kai Foon, often known as Teeth Dog, was the king of robberies, collecting billions of dollars by robbing Hong Kong jewelry stores. The Teeth Dog. Yip Kai Foon was one of the first to make use of the new weaponry, better known as Teeth Dog. Yip Kai Foon was a notorious Chinese mobster who operated in Hong Kong from the early 1980s through the 1990s. Yip led a gang of 5 armed men into Hong Kong in October 1984 when he was just 23 years old. They robbed 2 jewelry stores, King Fook Jewelry Co. Limited on October 10, 1984, and Dixon Jewelry Company Limited on October 27, 1984, and took about 2 million Hong Kong dollars in valuables. In order to catch him, police launched a sting operation, and an undercover cop pretended to be a potential buyer for the stolen goods. Upon identifying himself during the subsequent meeting on December 28, 1984, Yip attempted to shoot the policeman. The undercover policeman apprehended Yip with 2 handguns and ballistics. After being convicted, Yip was sentenced to 18 years in jail for 2 counts of handling stolen goods for each robbery, possession of firearms, and use of a firearm with intent to resist arrest. Yip appealed his conviction, alleging that he was just ordered to locate a buyer for substandard timepieces made in local factories. However, his appeal was dismissed in 1987. After 5 years into an 18-year sentence, the notorious Teeth Dog managed to elude captivity in 1989 by feigning appendicitis and fighting his guards while being treated at Queen Mary Hospital. He fled to the mainland and returned to Hong Kong with a stash of AK-47s 2 years later. After coming back, he and his associates robbed 5 goldsmiths in Kwun Tong, firing 54 rounds at police as they made their getaway, in a daylight crime so brazen that many bystanders mistook it for a movie set. As a result of Yip's and other criminals' crimes, shootouts in Hong Kong streets grew disturbingly prevalent, but it was always the thugs who seemed to be one step ahead of the cops at all times. On March 10, 1992, the gang was linked to the robbery of two jewelers on Tai Po Road in Sham Shui Po. Gang members fired 65 rounds at police and the public during the robbery, escaping with 3 million Hong Kong dollars worth of valuables. Then in 1995, Yip relocated his criminal enterprise to Shenzhen, where he took part in the abduction and murder of a Tianjin businessman and the murder of a police informant. His career came to an end on May 13, 1996, when he was captured after a gunfight with police in Kennedytown that left him paralyzed from the waist down. Yip and his gang were surprised by two policemen in an alley near the shore. The authorities suspected them of being illegal immigrants because they had just gotten off a boat and demanded identification. The rest of the gang ran, but Yip took a revolver from his suitcase and started shooting. The cops in their defense fired shots after his gun jammed, which resulted in him going down. Upon his arrest, he was discovered in possession of a machine gun, a pistol, and 1.8 kilograms of explosives. Interestingly, the government had a bounty of 1 million Hong Kong dollars on his head. He was charged with illegally possessing firearms and ammunition, as well as shooting with the intent to cause serious bodily harm, coming from wounds sustained by one of the officers during the arrest. While Yip was recovering from his injuries, he was charged with evading arrest and kidnapping during the van hijacking, which stemmed from his 1989 escape. Yip's trial began on February 18, 1997, with the defense stating that the police shot him in the back and subsequently stole 30,000 Hong Kong dollars from him. He fired his defense team 2 days later, purportedly after falling asleep during a cross-examination of a prosecution witness. On March 10, 1997, he was found guilty of all charges and sentenced to 41 years in prison, with 11 years remaining on his original term and 30 years on the new charges to be served concurrently. A dramatized account of Yip's life was made in the run-up to the trial by the name of King of Robbery, also known as Life Will Never Be Twice, starring Simon Yam and Roy Chung. But the film's intended August 1996 release was postponed by a court order. Yip Kai-foon died of lung cancer after serving a few years of his sentence. The ruler of the Triad. Apart from Yip Kai-foon's, Wan Kwok Koi had significant influence into nearly every part of Macau's notoriously corrupt institutions, thus making it difficult for police to combat the criminals even if they wanted to. Despite the fact that Macau's authorities had historically maintained a hands-off attitude to organized crime, Wan Kwok Koi, aka the Broken Tooth, launched a savage gang war for control of the city's casinos, prompting the Portuguese colonial authority to act. In a last-ditch effort to stop him, the government summoned a daring prosecutor from Lisbon. The Portuguese officer named Antonio Marques Batista, also known as Mr. Rambo, was adamant in his pursuit of Macau's gang leaders, even joining several street operations himself. However, he was stymied by local police officials' refusal to deal with the city's triads. Many officers in a tiny, close-knit city like Macau knew triad members personally and did not want to risk retaliation against their families. They were so scared that they failed to respond even when presented with evident aggression. In 1998, a man raced screaming through the Hotel Lisboa, trailed by 3 accused triad members waving knives. Outside the hotel, 3 armed police officers were stationed in a jeep, and the victim was stabbed to death meters from their post. Batista finally got his chance to act against the Broken Tooth when a bomb burst beneath his minivan while he was out for a jog. The device was linked to Wan Kwok Koi, and as a result, police entered the VIP room of the Lisboa, where all the big criminals were watching Casino, a film starring Simon Yam, in a part modeled on Yip Kai-foon's actual life. The police arrested most of the major criminals, and Wan Kwok Koi was imprisoned in a specially built Macau prison for 14 years. Many in Macau speculated that the incident was orchestrated to provide authorities with a reason to apprehend the city's most renowned gangsters. With the handover, the crime wave started to drop. Many other arrests followed, such as the notorious Chung Se-kyung, who fled to the mainland, where he was apprehended after purchasing explosives in a plot to blast Hong Kong government buildings. Authorities on the mainland tried, convicted, and executed him in 1998. Things have changed for good now, as following decades of armed robberies and spectacular shootouts, Hong Kong is now commonly recognized as one of the safest places in the world. Well, that's it for today's video. If you found this video interesting and helpful, then make sure to hit the like button and make sure to subscribe to our channel so that you always stay ahead of everyone and never miss out on any of the amazing and informative videos we have in store for you.